Okay, well, uh, I'm live. It says that I'm live, so I guess I'll believe that. Hello, we are live. Now I have to. There it is. Okay, Sherry. Sherry's manning a library front desk. FileMaker Pro. I don't quite even remember FileMaker Pro. Um, but thank you, and thank you for your service as a librarian. I always one of my favorite moments in in cinema is in It's a Wonderful Life, where George Bailey wishes that he had never been born, and then he has to go with Clarence and see what the world would be like if he had never been born, and it's a big showdown of his how great his life is compared to how horrible his life could have been, and the he's looking for Mary, he's looking for his wife, and he says, "Where is she? Where's Mary? Where is she, Clarence?" And finally, he's so flustered that he says, "Well, she's about to close down the public library for the night," and that's the horror there is that is that she's a librarian. That's if you had never been born, she might have sunk so low as to be a librarian, George. Thank God you were born, and she didn't suffer the fate of helping people find great books. It's such like in the middle of this fairly positive movie, just this vicious librarian slam out of nowhere. And she might have had glasses. Had you never been born, George Bailey, she might have had, needed corrective lenses. Somehow your birth healed her eyesight here in this movie that we're talking about. It's a Wonderful Life. Oh, the fate. Anyway, hi. This is still a grand experiment. I appreciate those who have hopped on, and it's sort of we're getting it up on its feet. I expect Gabe, our producer, to join us for some of these in the future, and we'll talk to Gabe, and we'll get my little screen here a little bit bigger, so I'm not just like the oversized stars part of an American flag taking up the screen. Welcome everybody who has, if you have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, any stories of burnout, let me know. Pop those into the chat over there, and we'll try to talk about those. I was thinking about this episode and why it compelled me so much, and why I wanted it to be the oh boy, Braden, nice. I hope you get that new job. I hope it doesn't burn you out right away. Um, and why we made this the first issue oriented show episode of the new show, and ever since I saw Jennifer Moss's article in the Harvard Business Review, that it really stuck with me, because I think it points to this fundamental dissonance that I alluded to in the intro of this show, but has always stayed with me about work. I don't know if you remember when you got like your first part-time job, maybe in high school, maybe after high school. I remember going to Jack in the Box burger place on the West Coast and putting in like a 6-hour shift or something, and just selling people a lot of burgers all day long, and putting it out on the counter. And I remember thinking, what in the world? This is what it's like all the time. This is what a job is. This is what it's just going to be like. Is this a joke? And it's not. It's just what you have to do for the rest of your life. You have to go in and put in labor. And that was a long time ago. I think 17 years old at the time. And I've had a lot of jobs since then, and I think they've all been better than that job. But there's still a sense of, oh, this is crazy. I've got to just be here and do this repetitive thing over and over and over, and then I'll get a check I'm told I'll get a check later on. And sometimes if you're fortunate, I don't want to say lucky, but fortunate to have a really good, meaningful job, the burnout can stay away, I think, because you are doing something, you're accomplishing something, you have the meaning to get through to the end of your day. And certainly a lot of the radio and podcast work I've had has fulfilled that. But even in those jobs, I find that there's days, that there's stretches, there's month-long stretches, there's years-long stretches sometimes where you realize, oh, it has meaning, but it's labor. It's the same thing over and over again. And I think I don't know. I think that struck me about the issue of burnout. Um, David's asking who we interview in this episode. So the episode is already out in the world now. It's the episode 3, the Burnout episode, and we talk with Jennifer Moss, who I kept calling Elizabeth Moss to Gabe, our producer, but Elizabeth Moss is the actor from The Handmaid's Tale, and she's not the guest. Jennifer Moss is, and burnout is her thing. Like she writes about it. She's got a book about it coming out. She does extensive work on this issue of burnout, and it's all been exacerbated by COVID to the point where 89. So she was part of this huge study, like 45 different countries, thousands of respondents. 89% of people said that in the last year they've had a diminishing sense of I can't remember exact phrasing, but the enjoyment of life, like moving forward in life sense has been diminished. And depression rates are high. Suicide rates among doctors and frontline medical workers are sky high, especially among women. And a lot of people are hitting this wall. And I think I've also maybe maybe as a result of being laid off or something, I don't know. I've been reverting to a more Marxist frame of mind about a lot of these things. And that's why it especially stayed with me when Jennifer Moss said, look, here's the thing. People are getting burnt out because their conditions are changing and their expectations are not. Like you have to go create the same working environment, either in the office or in your workplace, wherever that is, with modifications that are kind of constantly changing and are there to reduce the chance of you dying of a virus. Or you have to turn your home into your work, which is dissonant in and of itself, and you're not being given the tools to really make that happen. The unreality of that situation isn't really being recognized by employers that just want the product made, that just want you to manufacture your cogs and sprockets and get them out the door. And yeah, that's what Braden talked about, the hygiene in the workplace, where the base needs aren't being met, and you don't have things like fair compensation. You don't have a trusting environment where there will be no bullying at work. You don't have the fundamental the foundation to do your job well and to succeed. You don't have the tools. Maybe there was tools before you had to flee the office in 13 months ago, but they're not there now. And then the solution more and more from employers is to say, well, here's a meditation app, or here's listen to the ocean for 30 seconds or something. I found an example of this. I was just on the public radio station in Seattle, and they asked me about how at Amazon, Amazon is going to start requiring people who work in their offices to come back to work in the office after a year. But they are not going to mandate that you're vaccinated. So people are going to be coming back with no mandate to have vaccines, just to show up. It's this fairly insane public health risk, I guess, or just stubbornness that they're facing. Back when I worked in a media company, I would have had to answer the question about that by saying, Well, there are a lot of complexities in running a business like Amazon's, and there's certain scalability. And certainly, when I worked at Amazon, I would have had to talk like that. But I don't do any of those things now. I work for me, and so I said, "Well, that's just wrong and stupid." I mean, that's a lack of hygiene, both in the metaphorical sense, but also in the literal sense of no hygiene. So that's an example of what we're talking about. Here's my question for you: is that I just see this as, I'm tempted to see this. I'm not entirely convinced, but I'm tempted to see this as, oh, okay, we're in a capitalist economy. Corporations they need to make increasing amounts of money for their shareholders or the system collapses. And so they will draw that from the workers who are dependent on the wages, especially in cities and areas where it's expensive to live, right? So what are you going to do about it? You have to show up here and do what we say in these offices. And so I think it's always going to be this way. Like I think they can always, if the worker is done, just throw it out and get a new one. Jennifer Moss says it's not going to be like that, or it doesn't have to be like that, because the smart companies will realize that it takes time to find and train new people, and they will treat their people better to make them want to stay. They'll make the hygiene solid. They'll make the motivation really good. The pay will be good, because then the best people will want to come. The best fits for the jobs will want to come to those companies, and they'll want to stay. I think I'm a little more cynical than that. So she sees this world where the fairer and stronger the company is, basically the more empowered the human resources department is, the more successful the company will be, and the sales work inside to get people to stay will be strong. I just don't see it, and I think the big reason is Amazon, because it is a monopoly. It's huge. It's unmanageably large, and they treat their people like shit, and they always have. Maybe in the very a friend of mine was employee number 16 at Amazon. She had a really good time for a while. Anyway, what do you guys think? Do you think that the burnout will continue exponentially? Because it was on the rise before COVID, because of the economy and the separation of wages and the wage gap and inequities in terms of gender and race and all these other things that are happening in the American economy? Or do you think, yeah, COVID will pass, we'll all get vaccinated, things will get back to normal, maybe the economy has a boom, and then we're fine? I answer that in the comments if you like, but certainly ask that to yourself, because I'd like to hear about it. I'll say too, while you think about that, maybe type your response. We tried something new in this episode, where we had listener voices, which we had to compile before our show debuted, which is kind of an interesting paradox. But there's a group on Facebook called Thwad Balls, Thwad for the Hilarious World of Depression, name of my book and name of my former podcast. And it's a group not run by my former employer, so they're independent, and I've kept in touch with them because I wanted to have an army to bring over with me to the new place, like the KISS Army, really. And so we wanted to present those voices. The wrinkle we ran into is we wanted to get a good story out of, like a recorded story based on the email story that they had sent to us. And so it was a conversation with me, but I tried to kind of back my way out of the actual tape. So we kind of struggled with the idea, does this sound like someone leaving a message, or does this sound like John is interviewing that person? And the elegant solution we ultimately came to is set it up with me saying, I talked to some of our listeners, and then in the very first one, Gabe went in and found a little bit of hello with me saying hello to the person. So it's in the listener's mind. This is so inside baseball, but I think it's interesting. So that it's in the listener's mind that I am a part of the conversation. And then we had the conversation with Jessica, the forensic pathologist, the autopsy doer, come in at the very end. I had my voice come in at the end and ask her, if you're depressed and burnt out and bipolar, maybe doing autopsies of people who've overdosed, people who've died by suicide, isn't perhaps the best line of work for you. So I think it worked okay. We're going to continue to tinker with that. Also, if you listen on this episode, we tried something new at the very end. I found that I had to think of something to say at the end, like, I'm John Moe, take it easy, you're doing great, something like that. And by that point, I had been talking so much, so I had the idea that we would have listeners send in just a little, record on the voice memos on their phone, them saying, like, I'm Bob from Houston, and it's going to be okay. Or I'm Shirley from Finland, and you got this, something like that. So we're trying this thing where somebody introduces themselves and then says like a very, very brief thing that is of encouragement. I guess we don't have "it's going to be okay" because we don't ever know if it's going to be okay. But I think somebody has "you got this." Anyway, it was our first one this week, and we're going to keep going with them for a while longer. Thinking about putting one at the top of the show, but then I think we might get into a thing where we have too many cold open elements. So you know what a cold open is? Cold open is like on Saturday Night Live, the sketch that just starts out of the blue. It's what I used to do on the old show, and I'd say, is depression funny? But I don't do that anymore. Facebook group in the chat. It's called Thwad Balls. I think it should be Thwad Balls because you don't separate odd and balls on oddballs. They might change the name. I'm not sure if they will or not. But I think regardless, we should think of a name for Depresh Mode listeners. Depresh models? Depresh modifiers? I don't know. David Gahans? All Gahans on deck? I don't know. I'm working on it. MT says consumers have learned to expect fast and perfect service, and that adds fuel to the sense of I'm a cog in the service provider machine. Absolutely. And Sean, a former, like me, public radio journalist, we've been in those trenches. It seems like every extreme must have a breaking point, and I still believe that regarding burnout, but what that point will be, I just can't tell. MT again says, I think Amazon played a role in shifting consumer expectations of service. I work in retail, and the main issue my department grapples with is setting realistic expectations for what we can provide. I think those are really good points. David says, burnout will return its ugly head. I don't know if that's like a customer service thing, like burnout will just take its ugly head back to the ugly head store and get it swapped out. Not sure. But let's keep thinking of a name for the group. Like Deadheads for Grateful Dead fans, or I don't know, Thwad Balls, something like that. It's trickier with Depresh Mode because the name is already so pun intensive. But I think we'll find one. I think we'll just settle on one somehow. Let's keep thinking about that. All right, this is great. This was we have more people than last week, and things are ramping up. So next week on the show on Monday is Open Mike Eagle, who if you've been following my career, you know I end up interviewing Mike just about everywhere I go, and I've hosted a podcast with him before called Conversation Parade. Um, oh, Depreshies, nice, yeah. That's simple, but it works. Um, so yeah, I've known Mike for a long time. I booked him on a show I did called Wits when he was fairly obscure, but I just loved his music and I've gotten to know him and he's a friend of mine. So here's the deal with what Mike did. And I'm not going to recycle every guest that I've interviewed before, but in Mike's case, since the last time I talked to him, he he was hosting a show on Comedy Central. He had bought a house where he lived with his wife and his son, and he was touring around the world, doing really well. Well, COVID happened, the tour stopped, that income stopped, the marriage collapsed, he got divorced, custody was a very thorny, tricky issue, and his show on Comedy Central got canceled. And so he took all that, and Mike is somebody who really intellectualizes a lot of things, but has a history with depression, has a history with anxiety. And his therapist said, well, you're a writer and you've got a platform and you're really good at writing. So why don't you put your thoughts on what's going on with you down on paper? And that turned into his album, Anime Trauma Divorce, which is about what what the title would indicate. And it's a beautiful album, and some of it I listen to over and over and over for enjoyment. Some of the songs are hard to listen to because they're really painful. It's a little like a hip hop, like one side of the picture version of Richard and Linda Thompson's album "Shoot Out the Lights." If you've ever heard that one, I think I'm probably the first to make that analogy. But so we're going to talk about creativity. We're going to talk about Mike's life and how it came to a screeching halt and how he put that into songs. And we'll even get into the GameStop stock a little bit, which is an interesting passage. And what else? I'm working on an interview with another former guest from Hilarious World, Peter Sagal, host of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I just did a first edit on Zach Kornfeld, who's one of the Try Guys. And boy, are they popular. That's a big thing. And then I'm working on a speech that I'm giving next month and an episode of the show all about what the lingering effects of COVID will be in terms of trauma, in terms of shared trauma, in terms of complex trauma, and what we can expect, like how weird we can expect to get and in what ways. So that's coming up soon too. I really appreciate all the amazing reviews that we've been getting on Apple Podcasts. It's every time I need a little taste of candy, I go there and it's so sweet. Remember to subscribe to the show if people ask you about it, or if people don't ask you about it. Encourage them to subscribe and download. Those are like the big metrics to keep the show strong. Subscriptions, downloads, ratings, and reviews. We really appreciate it. I think we'll go from there. And now I got my second vaxie here today, and so that will mean that I should probably go take a nap. All right, that's all for this week. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to do this next week. Saying it right up front. We're going to talk about Mike Eagle. We're going to talk about rap music. We're going to talk about anime and trauma and divorce. Probably not much about anime. I don't know very much about anime, but certainly the other stuff. And won't that be fun? Thank you, everybody, for stopping by, and we'll see you soon.